KSAP Beats.
Welcome to another episode of Wired In with Apavelli. Let's get wired in. Let's talk about software development. So last week we had Microsoft Build Conference, Google I/O Conference, and I really enjoyed those conferences. I was really inspired, and Microsoft really addressed a lot of concerns that I had in regards to UWP. I talked about it last week. And Google I/O also was inspiring as well. And one of the key takeaways from Google I/O that I want to discuss today is Google is moving forward with Kotlin as their main programming language for Android development. And I know a lot of developers are excited. Some developers are not excited. I've read a lot of forum posts where you have Java developers versus Kotlin developers, and to me it's kind of annoying. I think it's kind of stupid to debate which programming language is better. Like, it's cool to have fun and poke fun. Like, I have friends where I would joke with them. You know, I have a friend that's a C++ developer, and he's like, oh, C++ is more powerful than Java, C#, and, you know, it's cool to have fun, but he doesn't say like those languages suck. They're not real languages. Now, you have some people that'll say, well, JavaScript is not a real language. PHP is not a real language because it's not compiled to the OS. It's an interpreter. But a programming language is a tool. So the purpose of having several programming languages is having, options to solve problems. But Google is moving forward with Kotlin. I'm not surprised because in 2017 they announced that they were going to support Kotlin for Android development by integrating Kotlin support with Android Studio. So you can create a project and it can be written in Kotlin 100%. You can also add Kotlin functionality to your existing Java code, which is pretty cool. What people don't realize is Kotlin is built on top of the JVM, Java Virtual Machine. So it's interoperable with Java. So you can call Java code in Kotlin, which is pretty cool. And I know a lot of developers will say, well, yeah, I'll learn Kotlin, or no, I don't want to learn Kotlin. But I feel like after reading like different blogs, different posts, you have a lot of passionate developers. And I think the time we live in, it's a great time to be a software developer. But I don't know if a lot of developers are really curious about learning multiple languages like before. Like, I don't know. It's just really, when I first started programming about 10 years ago, I, played around with a lot of languages. I mean, my first programming language I ever learned was C++. Then I learned Java. Then I learned C#. Then I learned PHP, then I learned Python, then I played around with R, then I learned SQL, and then I even learned some of the older languages like Scheme, Haskell, COBOL, and it's just like, I was just so amazed at the different paradigms of each programming language. And it also helped me think better as a developer. Um, so now it's a lot easier to build an app using like one technology. So, for example, if you're a C Sharp developer, you could write an app for any platform. I think that's great. I'm not here disputing frameworks. I think they have their place. In my opinion, I feel like frameworks were created for enterprises who wanted to build business applications for their customers, and they didn't want to hire someone that knows Java or hire someone that knows Objective C, Swift. If you have C Sharp developers, you can have those same developers build a mobile application with the skills that they already know. I think that's great. But even with Xamarin, now I would say Xamarin is a great framework. I've played around with Xamarin. I haven't published any apps. I haven't built any apps with Xamarin, like published them to the store. But Xamarin is really it's probably the best framework I've seen for native app development. Not even just mobile, but you can build apps for desktop, Mac. You can build augmented reality apps with Xamarin just using C Sharp.net. So I played around with Android and iOS development for Xamarin. And before I go into detail about that, I started Android development in 2011, 2012. And at that time, I used Java and Eclipse. Android Studio wasn't even around yet. I think Android Studio was fully like functional. Oh man, stable release of Android Studio. I want to say 2014, 2015, I believe. Yeah, I think it was 2014. I don't remember, but I was using Eclipse and it was kind of a pain. It was buggy. But I decided to do Android development because I said, hey, I know Java. And I didn't have a Mac, so I couldn't build iOS apps. So I said, I'm going to try this mobile app development. And I'm going to use Java and Eclipse. And I built my first Android app. I'm like, okay, this is cool. So then about a couple months later, I started really hearing more about Windows Phone. And I said, okay, I'll try to build a Windows Phone app. So to develop Windows Phone apps, you have to know C Sharp. So I already knew C Sharp. I took a course in college. C Sharp and Java are pretty similar. Like, in some cases, you can copy and paste code in Java and C Sharp, especially like if you're creating a basic method, and just change, some lines of code. But I thought that was pretty easy, and I started using Visual Studio, and I'm like, wow, it was very smooth. I built my first Windows Phone app in over a weekend, because the tools were so much easier to use. So it's 2 different languages. And so then I said, you know what? I'm going to have to do iOS development. So I purchased a refurbished Mac, and I didn't build an iOS app, but I just started playing around with Objective-C, and I created my own API. So basically, with my economics calculator, which is an app that I created on Android and Windows Phone, I just took those functions and I just created my API in Objective-C just to familiarize myself with the language. At the time, I didn't really like Objective-C. It was just the syntax was kind of ugly. But I believe if you have a C++ background, you can use it. Objective-C is much easier. And what Objective-C is, it almost felt like I was writing everything. Like, when you use Java and C Sharp, you kind of become spoiled, especially with memory management. But in Objective-C, you have to write all that. It's pretty tedious. And that's why I believe Apple created Swift, so more developers would, build apps for iOS and Mac using Swift. So Swift is more modern, just like Kotlin is more modern. And I was like, cool, okay, this is cool. I mean, I preferred Android development and Windows development, so both. But I was like, at least I have the option to create an iOS application. But I was using 3 technology stacks. And then I started building several Android apps using Android Studio, Java, several Windows Phone and UWP apps using C#. And so then Microsoft acquired Xamarin in I want to say it was 2016 or 2015. Maybe 2014, I don't remember. And I'm like, okay, this might be cool in the future. If I have a client, I know C#. If I need to get something out fast, I'll use Xamarin to build an iOS and Android application. At the time, Xamarin was a little difficult to work with, but now they've made it extremely, easy to use. And one thing I can say, me learning Java and Android development, it's really easy to understand the Xamarin framework for Android development, because all C# is doing is basically calling the Android APIs. It's using like a wrapper to call those APIs. So even if you're using C#, you still have to understand that particular platform. If you're building a native app, you still have to know the platform. It's just wrapped in C#. And it's abstract. C# abstracts a lot of things that you wouldn't have to worry about using Java, Swift, or for Android, and Objective-C. Wait, did I say Java and Swift? Java and Kotlin for Android, and Swift and Objective-C for iOS. But for me, just learning different languages, I'm always just curious to learn something new. And I feel like as a software developer, software engineer, you should always learn a new technology stack. Now, I'm not saying you should feel pressured and jump on every trend, but if you've been using Java for a long time, try to use JavaScript. Use a functional language. This is my philosophy. So pick 3 different paradigms. So if you want to learn an object-oriented language, choose Java or C++, one of those 2. If you want to learn functional programming, I would choose JavaScript, right? You want to learn, databases, SQL. 3 different paradigms. Also, too, you want to learn a compiled language, Java, C++, C, C#, choose one of those languages, and then pick a scripting language to learn. I've always been obsessed with learning new technologies. Even when there's a new language, I might not necessarily just download the language, but I'll read the documentation. I'll read some of the APIs so I can know what the language is capable of doing. So now we have Kotlin for Android, and I'm excited about it. I'm not going to just totally be negative and say to hell with Java or to hell with Kotlin. I'm going to embrace Kotlin, and I'm going to create a couple Android apps using Kotlin. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a hackathon over a weekend and just build, small Kotlin apps in Kotlin. That's how you really learn a language. And I know Kotlin makes it a lot easier to code certain things. Like you do things in maybe 2 or 3 lines, as opposed to Java. It can be a little verbose, and you're writing 10 lines to write to a file. I get that. But another problem I have is and for me, because I love Java. Java has made me a lot of money. But when people say Java is a horrible language, Java has evolved over time. So we're on version 12 now. So when people talk about like Java sucks, Java's too verbose, boilerplate code, well, you're really talking about Java 7. We're on Java 12. So why are you comparing newer programming languages to an older version of Java? See, but that happens because people fail to research and study the paradigm shift in different languages. And I'm not saying you need to code in Java, but at least you can read about what's going on. Like, hey, oh, they have streams now. Oh, they have lambdas. Oh, they have case functions now. Oh, okay. You can look at the syntax and say, oh, wow, the syntax is much more cleaner. Java has improved, but we just stay stuck in our ways and we stay stuck in a box that, we'll compare an older programming language to a newer technology that we're using. Like we'll compare JavaScript to Java, and you can't really compare those two languages because each have, their own purpose. Java is an object-oriented language. JavaScript is a functional language. It's a scripting language. JavaScript really started off as a client, a language for the browser. And now you have Node. You have Node.js that handles server-side development, where you can do server-side development in JavaScript. JavaScript has evolved. So let's say if I just started saying, oh, JavaScript sucks, but JavaScript has changed over the years. Now I know, when you get into software development, and like I said, you're used to using one technology, you kind of say, well, I don't really care. This works for me. But I believe you should always, study all the languages, research, see what's out there, because you might want to add another tool to your arsenal. I don't really like the shift in software development where we're like, let's just do everything in JavaScript. Let's just do everything in C#. Let's just do everything in Java. No. So I'll tell you, for me, I still use Java. And that's probably not a popular opinion for newer developers, but I have years of experience doing enterprise development. So running my own company, I'm an indie dev. I build a lot of my, RESTful services in Java. I spent a lot of years building REST APIs and organizations. And, that's what I do for mine because I know that. So why would I go out my way and say, hey, I'm going to just do it in JavaScript, right? I know how to do it because I've experimented with the mean stack, but that's not appropriate for the use case that I'm trying to accomplish. For me, Java is a little bit more mature with security and scalability. And I think JavaScript, PHP, those other languages, they're catching up. But Java's just more mature. They have more frameworks. But that's just my opinion on why I use Java. I don't think anyone is wrong for using JavaScript. I see a lot of cool developers write some good JavaScript code and build some great JavaScript apps using JavaScript. That's the beauty of having different languages and just learning. Learn different stacks if you can. Now, when I worked as a contractor for organizations, I would have a discussion with the developer or developers, and I would ask them, like, so you're using Java, for the past 5 years, or you're using Python. Do you ever go home and learn a new technology, or do you work on projects in a new language? About 90% of them told me no. They're just comfortable with the language they're using. But you always should learn a new language because you just never know when you might need to use it. There's a book, Pragmatic Programmer, and I think it's in the first chapter. They talk about building your knowledge portfolio. And I've adopted that model since reading that book of increasing my knowledge portfolio. In the book, it says, order books and, reading different books. And we live in a different time. People don't really order books. Everything's digital, online. You can go on websites and look at tutorials. You can go on YouTube and watch videos. You have Pluralsight. You can purchase a subscription to Pluralsight. There's so many ways to increase your knowledge portfolio. So I believe every developer should increase their knowledge portfolio if you have a passion for it. This pretty much consumes me. This is pretty much my life. It's like an athlete addicted to being the best basketball player or football player, baseball player, or an actor or an actress. They want to be the best in their field. Well, I feel like in the software development world, you want to be the best you can be in your field. Not better than anyone, but you want to be the best to your ability. So I feel like if you're getting in the software development world, you're pretty much saying I'm willing to learn, because you don't want to be forced to learn a new technology. You should be open to learning a new technology. It shouldn't be forced on you, because if you feel forced to learn a new technology and you don't want to learn it, then are you really passionate about this technology? So you have to ask yourself that question. So again, I think it's great that Google is, moving forward with Kotlin. It gives me another language to learn. I'm still going to use Java. I'm still going to use C#. I use both languages. I'm also working on learning some of the front-end frameworks like Angular, React. There's so many different technologies. I know it's hard to keep up, but I really feel like in this profession, you got to eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. Your passion should be your entertainment. Your passion should be your entertainment. So on that note, I'm going to sign off here. I'm going to finish working on some Android apps. And you can follow me on Twitter at Appavelli, Appaveli. You can follow me on Instagram at Appavelli. You can visit my website, www.pragmaticdevsolutions.com. Or you can go to appavelli.com to listen to this podcast on many platforms. Facebook. You can follow me on Facebook, Pragmatic Dev Solutions. That's my software development company on Facebook. You can follow that page to get the latest updates on the latest projects I'm working on, latest apps that I'm going to release, or just cool memes or photos. So you can follow me on those platforms. So until next time, I hope you guys stay wired in, stay passionate, keep learning, keep increasing your knowledge portfolio, stay away from negativity. Don't let the world distract you from your goals. Keep coding, stay wired in, and I'm out.